Right here, I have the MSI MPG 321CURX, which is actually one of the cheapest curved 32-inch QD-OLED monitors with a 4K resolution and 240Hz refresh rate that you can currently get. And that is actually a very nice and very balanced combination of specs. So let's check it out. Let's talk about what it can do performance-wise, and if it really offers that proper high-end gaming experience that you should expect from a gaming monitor with these specs. Let's begin. Design-wise, this is a decent and pretty well-built monitor. It has a proper solid metal stand that is quite sturdy and shows very little wobble, but I also like that it looks fairly minimalistic, and the dark gray color scheme is usually very easy to combine with other hardware on the market. I'm not a huge fan of the shiny black plastic that they used on some parts of the back of the monitor and the back of the stand, but at least it's in the back and you don't have to look at it that much at all. The stand itself is pretty large. It is over 60 centimeters wide, just over 30 centimeters deep, and it is not that flat, so it might interfere with your keyboard positioning if you have a smaller desk. Now, as you can see, the panel is curved, and that is also a bit of a subjective topic, I would say, because some people like curved 32-inch monitors and some do not. But either way, it is a very slight 1700R curve, so it is very easy to get used to it, and it will not get really in the way of your creative work either. If we look at ergonomics, this monitor is height adjustable. You can tilt it and you can swivel it, but it doesn't have a 90-degree rotation, which is all right, since most people will not really do that with a 32-inch 240Hz OLED. And of course, if you prefer, you can always VESA mount it as well. On the back, there is a basic cable management option, and you get one DisplayPort 1.4 connection and two HDMI 2.1 ports with 48 gigabits of through output. You also get a USB Type-C port with 98 watts of power delivery, plus a USB hub with a KVM switch. So I guess you can say that the DisplayPort 2.1 is missing, and you'll basically be using a DSC, but I also don't think that is such a big deal nowadays. The OSD is pretty okay, and it is easy to control it using a little joystick just behind the panel. There's a few options that can use a little bit of streamlining, like gaming-related color profiles and professional color profiles being in separate menus while basically doing the exact same thing. But there are actually a lot of features included that you don't always get everywhere else, including an Adobe RGB profile and some extra OLED care options beyond the usual pixel shifts, like multi-logo detection and taskbar detection. This monitor uses a Samsung QD-OLED panel underneath, and as you would expect, it has a pretty glossy coating, and you should probably avoid having bright light sources right behind you. Now, QD-OLED also means that the color fringing is still something to think about. It is less noticeable on monitors with a higher DPI compared to ones with the lower DPI, but it is still there, and depending on what you do with your monitor, it is definitely something that you should consider. Now, for gaming or for content consumption, it will not be an issue, and you will probably not even notice it at all. But if you work on your PC a lot, and then specifically with a lot of text, or if you do a lot of precise creative work, it might become an issue. And keep in mind, this applies to all QD-OLED monitors, not just this one. But let's look at some numbers, and as usual, I used Portrait Display's Kalman software combined with the VideoForge Pro 8K for testing. In the factory default setting, MSI is doing what a lot of other monitor manufacturers are doing as well, which is oversaturating the colors, because many people think that oversaturated colors look better. But it doesn't actually look right. You can see here that a lot of the midtones are just overblown, with a poor delta E average of 5.7 as a result. What you want to do is to set the monitor to the Display P3 mode instead, which is a lot more accurate. And with a delta E of 2.51, it is not the best calibrated panel that I've ever seen, and it's a bit short of MSI's own claim of delta E of less than 2, but it is still more than good enough for playing games with a decent color accuracy, and even good enough for most creative work as well, especially because these panels do cover almost the entire P3 color spectrum, and you can also calibrate them manually for P3 color work. If you prefer to work in sRGB instead, there is an sRGB profile that is calibrated okay-ish. Grayscale tracking is fine, but it's a little bit too red and a little bit too warm overall. The color accuracy is fine with a delta E of 1.98, so it is technically under 2 like they claim on their product website. In SDR mode, the brightness is capped at 257 nits, which is in line with the 250 nit spec. These panels can go brighter, but MSI chose to force an automatic brightness limiter in SDR mode, which allows this panel to reach the same maximum brightness no matter what's being displayed, avoiding that annoying brightness shifts that you can find on some monitors without ABL. Which is great, but I would still prefer to have it as an option that you can manually turn off as well. The minimum brightness is 33 nits, which means that it can dip pretty well and it will be more than fine for working in really dark environments. Since this is an OLED panel, the contrast is pretty much unlimited, viewing angles are great, and backlight bleed is not an issue that you need to think about. In HDR mode, the default setting is the True Black 400 mode, and the calibration here is similar to the SDR P3 calibration. So it is not the very best I've seen so far, but an average delta E of just over 3 in the regular color checker test is acceptable in my opinion, and in the technically harder color match HDR test, which specifically tests some of the hardest colors to reproduce, like certain skin tones, it scored a very respectable 2.65 delta E average. So again, there is some room for improvement, but these are not bad results at all. Now, the only downside is that the default HDR profile is limited to a maximum brightness of 460 nits. If you want more, you will have to swap to the peak 1000 nit mode, and here we measured a peak brightness of 1030 nits, which is a lot brighter and a lot more noticeable, but as usual with these maximum brightness settings, you will have to sacrifice a little bit of color accuracy. So I think the best thing here to do is to simply try both profiles and then see which one you like more. If you mostly care about gaming, an OLED panel is a very good option because OLED panels have near instant response times and they have no significant overshoot. And these panels also really benefit from high refresh rates. So if you can buy a 240Hz one instead of a 165Hz one for only a little bit more money, it will definitely be worth it. Latency can vary a little bit per model, even among OLED monitors, but this one did really well, ending up in a very respectable second place, just 1 millisecond behind the 1440p 480Hz Sony InZone M10s, which is a great result for a 4K 240Hz OLED. That also puts it a bit ahead of the Alienware AW3225QF. But if you're considering to get a monitor like this one, you should definitely think about which games you like to play and which graphics card you have or you plan on buying, because while panels like this check almost every box for a proper high-end gaming experience, so they are very large, they have a high resolution, they are very fast, and they offer a fantastic image quality, you will need a proper high-end GPU to run it in its full glory. If you don't need a high resolution for your work or your productivity projects, and you have a mid-range-ish or a much older GPU, it might be worth considering a 1440p monitor instead. Or you can consider a smaller monitor if you mostly want to play competitive esports titles. A larger 32-inch 4K models like this one will offer you a lot more immersion in gaming and a lot more workspace. It also comes with a G-Sync support, which is great for games that are hard to run at high refresh rates, but the target audience for this monitor are people that at least regularly expect to play games at a 4K resolution and then with good to great frame rates. Now, just like every other OLED monitor, this one has a little bit of a flicker going on that is just inherent to all OLED displays. So it has a very small brightness dip on every refresh cycle, and while this is not something that most users will ever notice or have to worry about, there is still a very small group of people that are more sensitive to this flicker and might find all OLED panels uncomfortable to look at. And even though on a 240Hz display like this one, this is way less noticeable than on a 60Hz or 120Hz TV, there is still a chance that some people might notice it. And just like with all OLED panels and QD-OLED panels, burn-in remains something that can happen in the long run. MSI offers a 3-year-long warranty that specifically mentions burn-in coverage, which is nowadays becoming a standard for most OLED panels, but it is still something that you need to think about after that warranty expires. So I think the MSI 321CURX is a very nice monitor. It is sturdy, it has a very decent metal stand, it has plenty of options in its OSD, it doesn't do anything really wrong, and it just has a lovely, big, high-resolution, high-refresh rate OLED panel that is just great to look at no matter what you're doing with your PC. And keep in mind, these are proper high-end panels, and it is very important to remember that even if I criticize some things and say that they could be better, these panels are still inherently very impressive to use and better than most other mid-range options on the market. That being said, there is definitely some room for improvement, like removing the cheap plastic on the back of the monitor, adding DisplayPort 2.1, and calibrating the profiles a bit better. I mean, the calibration is mostly fine, and anyone who really wants perfect calibration will be able to do it manually anyway, but I would still like to see a profile that is close to that perfect color accuracy right out of the box, as they did with some of their other models. But let's look at the price. Now, when I picked this monitor up, it was 850 euros, making it the cheapest 32-inch 4K 240Hz monitor that I could find here in the Netherlands. 27-inch 4K OLEDs were actually even more expensive, and 165Hz models were not really cheaper either. So even with some points of improvement, it is very hard to not recommend this monitor at this price. The cheapest DisplayPort 2.1 model would be the Aorus FO32U2P, which costs 1100 euros or 30% more, and the Asus ROG PG32UCDM, which does have better factory calibration but currently costs 1,400 euros, which makes it about 65% more expensive. The Alienware AW3225QF I've been using for a couple of months is a little bit more, but it's only a little bit better in some ways while being a bit worse in others. So if this MSI is cheaper in your region, I would definitely go for this one instead. The main alternative price-wise would be MSI Zone 321URX, and at that point you can just decide whether you want a flat or a curved panel based on your own preferences. And as always, prices will vary over time and very much so differ per region, but I still think it is fair to say that MSI is being pretty aggressive with pricing, which in my opinion makes this a monitor that you should at least consider if you're looking for something that offers that proper high-end experience without spending too much money. Now, that is all I had for today, but before I go, let's check out the sponsor of this video. This video was brought to you by Seasonic and their Vertex power supplies. These fully modular power supplies are extremely efficient and very quiet due to their fan design and their hybrid fan mode that stops the fans completely under 40% load. They come with a variety of connections for any kind of system you have in mind, and to wrap it all up, they now offer a nice and cozy 12-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. Thank you all for watching and staying to the end of this video. If you liked it and you want to see more videos like this one, please do consider clicking that subscribe button so you never miss my future uploads. Bye guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!